we're going to look at the regulations. What do we need to be put into place? And in particular, we want to know what are some of the global standards? What's the state of play globally? And where is Africa? How can we shift things from Africa? Maybe in some ways Africa's doing well, maybe in others it isn't. And we shall hear from each of our panelists in just a short while. But to kick us off this afternoon, we're going to have a presentation. And let me warmly welcome Vice Minister for Policy Coordination from Japan to take, would you like to do it from there or you may take the podium. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Ms. Gizuru. It is my great honor to have the opportunity to speak at the Transform Africa Summit here in Kigali. Japan has been working on assistance to Africa. In particular, since 1993, we have hosted the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, and have worked on a number of issues with the people of Africa. In 2016, TICAD was held for the first time in Africa, Nairobi, where Japan has announced to contribute to the African social stability and the resolution of social issues by accelerating efforts in the ICT field. In order to promote the diversification and the industrialization for the economy in Africa, the Japanese government has been working on a number of issues, including high-quality infrastructure investment. Here, I will present the video which shows the contribution from Japan to Africa. 1-minute video, please.
Amid significant development, the vast continent of Africa seeks to connect with the bigger picture going forward. Japan supports Africa's future in every way possible. Bridges and roads connect areas, countries, and people. When connected, people share knowledge and experience, as well as joy and other emotions. Focusing on the future and expanding regional networks, this chain of connections will help Africa grow and prosper. When countries with different histories, languages, and cultures form dynamic links, Africa will realize its true potential. Japan believes in Africa's future and strives to help it flourish.
Thank you. Next, I will introduce our ideas and the trends of Japan's efforts related to the connectivity, which is one of the main subjects to this session. For bridging the data divide to enable a digital society, it is necessary to install a digital network infrastructure with a certain speed and to achieve high-quality applications with the optimal use of digital technology. In Japan, 99% of households have the capability to connect with over 30 megabps of the fixed infrastructure, including FTTH. For mobile communication services, the population coverage reaches almost 100%. Telecom operators play the main role for bridging the digital divide. The Japanese government has supported them to expand the coverage area while promoting competition policy. It is difficult for private sectors to deploy connectivity in sparsely populated districts, such as remote islands and mountainous areas, because of the cost ineffectiveness. The Japanese government subsidizes the local governments so that the development is driven by the collaboration of the local governments and the operators. In the deploying process, one of the driving forces was the local government's recognition that the FTTH connection is essential to promote the development of industry and business in their regions. Of course, Japan's experience may or may not apply to all countries. Here, I would like to show you the video about ICT infrastructure and solutions. Please.
Design tomorrow. Infrastructure with Japan. Japan. Our history of modernization was constantly overcoming various limitations. However, this background of trial and error has given Japanese infrastructure four main strengths. ICT solutions. Japan possesses one of the highest levels of information and communications technology, ICT, in the world, as well as a proven track record in this field. For instance, we have contributed to international communications infrastructure development in various regions as a leading international supplier of optical submarine cables. A biometrics authentication system has also been adopted by over 70 countries, protecting people's safety and security. And we are supporting implementation of ICT for disaster management in many countries, using our knowledge as a country with frequent disasters. Japan is also making active strides in technology transfers aimed at making practical use of ICT. With the introduction of digital terrestrial broadcasting in Botswana, we are striving to develop businesses that make use of data broadcasting and transfer TV program creation technology. And in our communications satellite business located in Turkey, we have not only produced and delivered satellites, but have also provided high-level technology education programs aimed at autonomous development. Japan's ICT is also contributing to the optimization and increased lifespan of existing public infrastructure. In the case of Vietnam's Con Tho Bridge construction, we have introduced a system for real-time measurement of strain and oscillations. By detecting abnormalities quickly, serious damage and deformation can be prevented. As part of Myanmar's postal service, we are working to digitize money transfer services. Japan is able to offer multifaceted support for your country's growth, precisely because it possesses such comprehensive capacity for ICT development.
Thank you. Japan contributes to bridging digital divides through the development of quality ICT infrastructure and its utilization. By the way, by incorporating new technologies such as IoT, big data, and AI in all industries and socioeconomic activities, new values and services will be created, one after another. As a result, we can achieve a more human-centric society in which everyone can enjoy a high quality of life while resolving various social problems. Here I will present the video, the last video of the Japanese efforts utilizing AI and robots. Please.
Japan's population is aging at a more rapid pace than that of any other country. Autonomous driving technology and home robotics are two promising solutions to this challenge.
Yes, sir.
These technologies promise to provide people of all ages and physical capacity the ability to move around independently and freely.
The latest AI technologies allow machines to learn from experiences, adjust and optimize their operations, and detect anomalies without any human intervention. We will make many of such machines talk to each other, exchange their experiences, so that they become more intelligent. These intelligent machines will certainly revolutionize the manufacturing industry.
Cutting-edge medical technologies, including regenerative medicine, in which Japan is a world leader, critically rely on individual top-level doctors and researchers. This robot will observe and evaluate the changing state of an organism and determine the appropriate next move. This future robot with eyes and brains will exceed the boundaries of technology.
Japan has a long tradition of excellence in the manufacturing industry. This is where we bring our strengths, IoT and artificial intelligence, to make revolutions in this core industrial sector.
Advanced biotechnological therapies can be reproduced so that patients anywhere in the world can receive the treatment. Japan will break new ground for the future of humankind.
Japan as a nation and society needs the technology the most and is the most prepared to adapt and embrace it. Japan now has the opportunity to lead this global technological shift and societal transformation.
Thank you. Lastly, I hope that the Transform Africa Summit will lead to the further investment in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And it really is fascinating to watch Japan's journey. And we appreciate the commitment. I was at the forefront of TICAD, and we appreciate the partnership with Japan. I come now to each of our panelists for your substantive contributions. And as I said, we want to know what's the global state of play and what can Africa learn. And you may want to speak to one of the issues more than others. So we're talking about digital identity, connectivity, we're talking about regulations as well. And so let me begin with Andres, please, your thoughts. Take us through the journey. And I think you said to me you're fascinated with the idea of digital identity, and that's your focus. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Definitely, I think digital identities, those are basis for really good digital public services. I think when some governments, they will start to think about digital public services, they have to start with providing single digital identities guaranteed by the government to their citizens. We know about those success stories. For example, in India, they provided identities, digital identities to more than 1.2 billion people. And in this way, they were able to cut those middlemen when paying state allowances to their citizens. And they were able to save even $8 billion a year. The same happened also in my country. I'm from Estonia. And we gave those digital identities to our citizens already in early 2000s. In fact, in Finland, they did it even a year earlier than we did it in Estonia. But in Finland, those smart ID cards, they were voluntary-based. In Estonia, it was a must. You can have your travel passport or not, you have to have a digital ID card. But it took 6 years for Estonians to start to use those ID cards even in digital way. In the very beginning, it was good to use those cards when traveling to Finland to identify yourself when crossing borders or even to open envelopes. It was quite good to use this smart ID card. Not a very smart way, of course. But then in the year 2007, we introduced on the level of the government so-called once-only principle. What does it mean? State has right to ask for the same information only once, and the state has to remember and then to use this information with my permission once again. And it gave real boost on usage of digital signatures, digital identities. Now Estonians are signing digitally more than 1.3 million times a week, and population of Estonia is only 1.3 million inhabitants.
So let's just look at that for a minute. You're 1.3 million people in Estonia, and they're signing digitally. Yes. 1.3 million times a week. So remarkable.
Remarkable, of course, I agree. But it's not just remarkable, but it's also really efficient. In Estonia, already a couple of years ago, we figured out that we were able to save one working week a year just because of digital signatures. And this is equal to 2% of GDP. This is equal to defense expenditures in Estonia, for example. But now there is a problem. This is a really efficient solution inside of one country. But in Europe, you cannot use those digital public services from some other countries. And that's why we launched our eIDAS regulation proposal which allows mutual recognition of those digital identities. And I think it's really important also here in Africa to create those digital identities inside of countries in the way it will be possible to recognize those identities also in some other African countries. I think it's very timely and a really good idea to create single digital markets here in Africa.
Thank you very much for that. And for anybody representing government in the room, I think we have a very good perspective because you are the former Prime Minister. And therefore, when you talk about efficiencies, you know what you're talking about in terms of also the public sector perspective on these issues. I'll also just tap into the issue that in Africa, even as we look to ensure that we are issuing or working with the idea of digital identities, there's refugee situations that some of our countries are facing. How do we deal with that? Really critical. So I come next to Mats for your perspective, please.
So thank you, Julie. That's I will speak, I think, around connectivity and identity. It's sort of linked, I think. And you introduced me as Mats, right? But really my identity for many is +4474501588888, which is my mobile phone number. And so connectivity and identity is really tightly linked. I represent the mobile industry. GSMA represents the mobile industry. And if you add all the mobile subscribers together globally, we connect some 5.6 billion people. So 2/3 of the world's population are connected to internet or connected to a cellular service. That gives us a huge power and a huge responsibility as well. And we're now just on the eve of 5G. And we have been discussing 5G quite extensively here during a couple of days. And 5G will be launched. Japan is one of the countries that are leading and launching 5G together with South Korea, Middle East and North America as well. They will launch commercial networks this year and next year. Then, of course, there will be plenty of other networks being launched as well. We see that in 2025, so that's only 7 years from now, there will be 1.2 billion 5G connections, 1.25 billion connections. So this is all great. However, we still have roughly 1 billion people globally that does not have any form of identity. Right. And the risk now when we're moving into 5G, a connected society where the mobile phone number is the identity, is that we're leaving that billion people aside. And that is a tragic event if that would happen. So I think we need to realize that connectivity and identity go really hand in hand. And yeah.
That's really critical. What would you say to this room in terms of what must we do to ensure we're not leaving these people behind?
Well, a couple of things. The first is that, as we all know, the KYC, the Know Your Customers movement, for banks and etc., it's critical, and that's why Anders so rightly did the example of the number of digital signatures in Estonia. And I'm Swedish, and I'm living in a neighboring country, and I can verify the enormous productivity and efficiency in Estonia. It's just remarkable. So that is important. So what we need to do in the KYC bit is that, unfortunately, these 1 billion people are many times the most vulnerable people. And they come, maybe they are refugees, maybe they do not have any form of identification. And when you go and try to get your SIM card or your prepaid card, you need to be able to verify who you are. And you are in a vicious circle. You will not be able to get that SIM card. So we need to find a more relaxed rules, if you will like, for some of these more vulnerable people to get them on the internet and get the identity that the mobile phone number will give them.
Thank you so much for that. Robert, I'm fascinated to hear from your perspective and a Facebook perspective what your thoughts on these issues are.
So thank you very much, and I apologize for my voice, and I'll do as best as I can. On the previous session, one of the questions that you asked was, why are people not connected? right? And we started the session plenary this morning. Everybody agreed that being connected was essential in order for society and individuals to be able to get the benefits from the connectivity in ICTs. So if you're not connected, you're not benefiting. So one of the things that we're really focused on is how do we help get everybody connected? And when I look at that, we've asked what are the drivers? So for 2 years now, we've worked with the Economist Intelligence Unit with a study that they ended up calling the Inclusive Internet Index. And we look at 86 countries, 54 variables for each country. And when they did the analysis, they grouped the findings for each country into 4 baskets. Availability and affordability, that's kind of the supply side, right? That's the connectivity. But then on the demand side, they said there's relevance and readiness, right? Really, really important. And so when I look at the title of the session, right, digital identity, connectivity, and regulation, you go, what's the connection between these? Actually, if you want to think about it, all 3 are enablers.
Right.
Connectivity, without that, there's nothing. Without the connectivity, right, you need that just to enable anything.
Right, right.
Digital identity, what we've already heard twice, is a key enabler as well. On the demand side, connectivity on supply side, digital identity is only one of multiple variables needed on the demand side to actually have people use it, benefit. Estonia is a great example, and what you did there with government and government services, banking, financial, driver's license tied to your digital identity, boy, did that drive demand, right? It really focuses. And of course, the regulatory framework is an enabler as well. Without the right regulatory framework, you're not going to get the kinds of investments, right? And that was also part of the discussion this morning. So one of the other things, just very quickly, that we took away from the most recent study with The Economist was they did a survey, a global survey, about 2,700 people. They asked people who are already connected to the internet, how do they use it and how do they value it? And looking at the regional, we don't have it by country, but by region, if we looked at the data, the results for Africa, really interesting. People who are connected, on average, 79% use it multiple times a day. High-income people in the region use it 85% multiple times per day. Not surprisingly, about a little less than half of the people surveyed in the region prefer their mobile connection. But among millennials, 56%, right, are your customers, right? They prefer mobile. And in fact, mobile internet is becoming the predominant way people connect.
Right.
And that's why 4G, 5G is absolutely so important. One of the things, though, that, and by the way, and we can get back to it in more data, people use the internet to help them get jobs. People say that it helps them at work. People use it, millennials especially, for entertainment. And, e-commerce, shopping. But a couple of things that were particularly interesting. 60% of people here said the internet helps me be more independent.
It helps them to be
more independent. And 69% of people in the region said the internet, connecting to the internet, has improved life in my country. Millennials, it was 73%, and among high-income people in the region, that was 82%.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you for that data. And if anybody wants to go and look for that, that's the Inclusive Internet Index in partnership with The Economist.
That's correct.
Thank you.
On The Economist website.
Thank you, on The Economist website. Moritz, your perspective, please.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for inviting us and us being part of Transform Africa. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. The world is going through a massive transformation, the digital transformation, or the fourth industrial revolution, as we all call it. And it's key for governments as well as for the public sector. Yeah, it's impacting all of us. And we at Intel, we also went through a massive transformation. Yeah, we're going to be 50 years old this year. as a company, but with a company always started based on innovation. And most people recognize Intel as a PC-centric company. We made a transformation over the last, say, 4 or 5 years to become a data-centric company. And that has not been easy. And I think the key things for us when you go through a change is leadership is essential when you go through a transformation, a clear strategy, and execution. And when you talk about execution, it is always easy to say we need to get this done by X date, et cetera, but it's truly down to the attention to change management and skills development. Okay. When you go through a digital revolution as we are today, the skills which are needed tomorrow are different than the skills we used to have before. So that is fundamental. And if I look at being part of Transform Africa, amazing opportunity, but also some key challenges which we need to face. And I think many of us already discussed it. Affordability of broadband and connectivity. It's an absolutely must for the transformation, no question. Second, establish a modernized data center, which is ready for the cloud. We cannot and we must, as we all talk about, the data is everything. We're monetizing data today. It is available to all, and also here in Africa. So we need to make sure that also in Africa, we have the build out and be connected for the data center of today and tomorrow. And then last but not least, also in correlation to the early conversation, an electronic ID system at the national level is key. And what I mean by at the national level, it would be highly inefficient if every ministry will have their own ICT solutions. Yeah? We need to make sure it is scalable, and it is used as the backbone for the ministry across the country.
Right.
Those are fundamentals, and then you add to that the regulatory and the policies to make sure it is sustainable and it's getting executed properly. I think those are the fundamentals for Transform Africa into a success.
Thank you. You lead me perfectly into my next question, which was going to be, let's focus now a little bit on regulations and let's look at policy. So a couple of questions that I'll just throw out at you and come to each of you for your thoughts. Can regulation keep up with the digital revolution? And what is the role of the regulator in this dynamic age? Andres, I'll begin with you, please.
Definitely. With regulations, we can support digital development in our countries. I'm still thinking about this sentence said by Honorable President Kagame this morning. He said that his first business in the government was to make business happen. So to create a fruitful environment for businesses. And with the regulations, we can create fruitful environment for digital businesses in our countries. But it's not enough to create this fruitful environment just inside of one country. It's extremely important to try to harmonize those regulations, those rules across the continent, across Africa. Because if Africa or Europe will stay fragmented, as it is right now, then the message we will send to our entrepreneurs, to our startups, will be quite simple message. Stay at home or go to the United States, where they have a huge single market with more than 300 million healthy customers.
And that's
global service providers, they are able to understand about those different rules in different countries in African continent. But small and medium-sized enterprises, startups, practically it's impossible to understand about more than 50 different sets of rules, and once again, stay at home. But this is not the message. Also, African governments, they would like to send to their smart people.
Thank you for that. We don't want to send that message in Africa. Absolutely. Mats, please.
Yeah, no, I think policies and regulation is playing a super important role. I'm not as optimistic as Andres here. I think that the world is moving at a super fast speed right now, and we need to be able to try things. We need to be a little bit more free. We need specifically 4 things. If you like to take Sub-Saharan Africa, the coming 2 years, the mobile operators in Sub-Saharan Africa will invest some will invest $23 billion in mobile capex. And that is not given. It is only going to happen if they see that there is a return on that investment. And we need specifically 4 things. We need harmonized spectrum, which is critical across the world, but also in Sub-Saharan Africa, obviously. We need to have a reduction in sector-specific taxation. Mobile operators and handsets are sometimes obscenely taxed. And we know affordability is one of the key barriers, as Robert just said, to adoption of mobile internet. So taxation needs to be under control. And thirdly, we're still depending on base stations. So we need to have permits. We need to be a more smoother way of getting permits to build out your base station, erect the tower, get the rooftop antenna in place, etc. And fourthly, in this new world of data, we need to have a privacy and data regulation that is harmonized. Because data doesn't see any borders. Data is flowing freely. Data doesn't see what is right and what is wrong. So we need to be able to protect consumers. We need to make sure that consumers understand the power of data. And we have had some recent examples in Cambridge Analytica where that has not been the case, right? So those are 4 really critical things.
Thank you for those 4. Robert, very quickly, over to you.
Yeah, very quickly. I think of regulation as a subset of policy broadly, which leads you to the question of the appropriate role for government. And I think if you think about it that way, you can look at the things that where actually it's regulation or policies are absolutely essential enablers for the investment, for the infrastructure. And I think, again, Estonia is a great example of that. Then, of course, there are, occasionally there's going to be a, quote, a problem. So we see regulation as a way to solve for something. But there, as a former regulator, I was a regulator in the US at the FCC for over 20 years. So I joke I'm a recovering regulator.
And now you work for a platform that is way ahead of any regulation.
And we can come back to that. But I always thought of regulation, right, in the following way. First, don't regulate for theoretical problems. If it's a specific problem, fine, and then the regulation needs to be targeted. It needs to be appropriate, that addresses that real problem in a targeted way. It needs to be proportionate, not bigger than it's needed. It needs to be practical, sensible. And I actually think it should be time limited, because you can actually solve a problem, and then leaving the regulation in place can have unintended adverse consequences going forward. And frankly, some of the mobile operators in Europe are suffering from this because regulations imposed back in the 90s when we went from monopoly to competition and opened up the market that was designed on fixed, but in mobile there's a lot more. So there's some, there's some of the regulations still needed, but there's some other regulations on some of the interconnections and some of the things that are left over that are now preventing investment. So we have to be very careful that we don't have sort of the hangovers, the leftover. And then, again, going back to the broader enabling, I think they're really important things such as digital identity, business rules, protection of intellectual copyright, and other regulations or laws that are essential for rule of law to attract the investment, and government has to do that. Only government can do that.
Thank you very much. Moritz?
Yeah, just to add, I think what is key is we got 22 member states part of the Transform Africa, if I'm not mistaken. So if you talk about regulation, collaboration is key, not only between the member states, but also with the private sector. And also, I think what will help to keep up is to learn from BKMs. We got the example from Estonia or from other countries. If there are models being implemented where the regulation can go faster because the code has been cracked, so to speak, why reinvent the wheel? Let's try to be smart and learn from examples which are working globally.
Thank you for that. I'm coming to special interventions in just a moment, but first, Vice Minister, I want your take on the importance of regulations and policy and whether they can keep up. What has Japan's experience been with the digital environment?
Yes, thank you. Let me allow speaking in Japanese because I couldn't speak that.
I believe the translation. Yes, thank you.
Please set the equipment, and so you will hear the lady voice.
The translator will actually speak with a microphone. You don't need to put your gadgets on. Thank you.
レギュレーションが非常に重要な要素だということは私も賛成いたします。レギュレーションの不透明性をできるだけなくして透明性を保つ、それから予見性を保つということが極めて重要であります。しかしながら現在我々は AI ですとかビッグデータとか、IoT とか予見できないようなディスラプティブなテクノロジーをどんどん導入しないといけません。したがってまずは次の3つのメソッドが非常に重要だと考えます。1つ目がまず、新しい技術を社会に導入するための実証的な試験をできるだけやりやすくすること。
Okay, thank you. One moment, and we'll allow the translator to. Thank you.
Okay, about regulations, I think that the feasibility and the prevoir to see the future is the important. And but in nowadays we are dealing big data, ION, and so on. So, in order to do that, I think that to make environment to implement new technology or experiment to prepare these circumstances is important. I have 3 points, and I just mentioned one.
Okay, thank you.
2点目はですね、何をするかと言いますと、まずそのレギュレーションをできるだけミニマイズすると。でその代わりにできるだけボランタリーなベースで守れるようなルールを例えばコードオブコンダクトですとかガイドラインのような形で作ると、これが2点目として大事だと思います。
And the second point is to minimize the regulation, and as the voluntary base, we have to prepare the code and regulation and minimize it. It's an important point.
3つ目がアンシプさんがおっしゃったことと共通するんですけども、サービスがクロスボーダーするためにはインターナショナルなハーモナイゼーションが極めて重要であります。したがってそれに留意することが重要だと。でそういった3つのことをやることによってアフリカにインベストメントをアトラクトすることができると考えます。
And I think that the third point is harmonization of the service is also important.
Thank you very much for that. Let me now welcome our special interventions, and we shall begin with Philip Metzger, Director General of the Swiss Federal Office of Communications. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, things don't just happen, things are made to happen. Increasing internet access and creating value with our own data depends on deploying the right policies and establishing regulatory conditions designed for a relatively well-known, understood problem, which is investments in the necessary infrastructure and their use in more remote, less populated, and less prosperous areas are often unattractive for private companies, as conditions for investment are too often absent. So just a little over a year ago, in March 2017, an expert group that I had the honor to chair was convened by the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development to identify specific steps that need to be taken to close the ongoing gap in broadband coverage and usage. Last February, our expert group released its report entitled A New Deal, Investing in Our Common Future, Policy Recommendations to Close the Broadband Gap. This is the result of a multi-stakeholder effort by committed high-level individuals from the mobile industry, from over-the-top service providers, and from governments who, regardless of whether they are from the public or the private sector, have gone out of their way to jointly propose solutions that will bring the benefits of digital connectivity to everyone, everywhere. Our policy recommendations are very concrete. They address pressing issues that are hampering the rollout of digital networks and services to people who desperately need them. And the expert group has identified a major need for action in 4 particular areas. First, provide a healthy investment climate. To do so, governments should develop and regularly update digital strategies. They should create stable regulatory conditions and frameworks. And they should avoid levying specific taxes on ICT goods and services. Second, enable lower cost supply of infrastructure and effective use of spectrum. Among other things, governments should make their strategies technology neutral, and spectrum auctions should not be used for short-term profits and fiscal purposes. Third, make ICT markets work for all. ICT markets should be fully opened, and competition should be regulated efficiently, and new partnerships and innovative technologies should be made possible. In view of this panel's topic and in light of the discussions that we have just heard, the last area that we identified as liberating demand for the wider digital economy may be of a particular interest here. Infrastructure development alone is not enough. Governments should also stimulate demand for digital services, for instance, by offering government services online. They should seek the establishment of digital identification systems. They should promote mobile payments and allow greater participation by technology players in digital financial services. They should also encourage local ICT startups and bring greater internet and ICT training into education, digital education for everyone, including women and girls, particularly in data science, and privacy is vital in our view. Also, the controls on the collection, the processing, and the sharing and other use of personal data should be proportionate to the risks and sensitivity of the type of data that is involved. And personal data-related restrictions should not be blindly extended to other areas. Ladies and gentlemen, in concluding, these policies that I've just set out to you are what we need to develop connectivity and a digital identity for all of us. Speaking as the chair of the expert group, I sincerely hope that policymakers, regulators, and the private sector take note of these recommendations and start to implement them to address the unacceptable, persisting digital exclusion of half the world's population. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And now we'll hear from Nicholas Negroponte from MIT. Sir, the podium is yours. And he says he has some very unconventional thoughts.
Yes, fasten your seatbelts. This is a different kind of talk because I want you to leave with one idea, just one. And I'm going to say it, I'll tell you what the consequences are, and then I'll make a recommendation for Digital Africa. And the idea is to reconsider connectivity as a human right, not as a business, not something that serves customers, but as something that citizens are benefiting from. And don't get hung up by human rights. Call it then a civic responsibility. Has it ever struck you as odd that when you leave this afternoon, you will drive on roads, you will walk on sidewalks, tonight you'll have street lamps, and you are paying for those as part of civic society? Why isn't connectivity in that class? Why is connectivity not free the same way the sidewalk is? Now, it's free to you, if you will, as an individual, and it's low cost to society, or it's whatever cost it is. And if we can move in that direction, then the world will be connected. And there are ways of doing that that are not expensive. They are low cost, but the resolve to do it is too low because it's not in certain business interests. And while I'm very happy with the development of wireless, there really have been two developments. There's been the carrier side, and then there's been what I'll call Wi-Fi as just a category, which, by the way, is on the logo. So those two are very different. Now, what could Africa do? Africa, at the African Union level, at a very small expense, launch a satellite that connects all of Africa. Every single person who points at it is connected. Free. And it would be the most amazing if people then said, yes, by the way, in Africa, the internet is free. And that would be unique, and I urge you to do it. Thank you very much.
Wow. Launch a satellite, connect everybody. Yes, you did. Thank you so much. A better round of applause, please, for Nicholas. And next, let's give a warm welcome to Abdulaziz Saleem Al-Ruwais as he comes up to share his perspectives. The floor is yours, sir. Better round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In the beginning, I'm very pleased to be one of the participants in this important event. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Smart Africa and representative of the states in the initiative for crafting a promising future for Africa continent. And I will assure you that Saudi Arabia is supporting that initiative, and we look forward for future collaboration. For our subject, which is digital identity, connectivity, and regulations, I was going to say just a few remarks that have to be considered in the discussion. While the value of cross-border data has increased substantially, the development of digital world has not been balanced in all parts of the world due to the challenges faced by some regions or countries. Among these challenges are issues related to digital identity, cybersecurity, and privacy. Though the importance of digital identity mechanism is globally being recognized, much work remains to be done. Information regarding individual identities is becoming an increasingly valuable commodity, and as a consequence, its protection and management has become a pressing matter. Digital information and providing services through the internet create risk related to cybersecurity, while increased risk of cybersecurity attacks, identity theft, and human error. Serious information leaks have been known to occur, creating major privacy concerns for countries and individuals are there. Building confidence and security in the use of ICTs was one of the pillars of the outcomes of World Summit on Information Society, WSIS, that was held in Geneva 2003 and in Tunis in 2005, and should be addressed by collaboration between government and the private sector. This collaboration should aim to provide an environment that is safe for users and at the same time enable providing new and innovative services. In this regard, global efforts and collaboration is essential. Legal and policy considerations require urgent development. I believe that the ITU has to play a vital role to enhance user confidence, build trust, and support countries in developing an ICT environment that is safe and secure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, and that focus on security, absolutely essential. as we wrap up, gentlemen, and I just noticed this is an all-gentlemen panel, sorry. So I hope to see more ladies on these panels in the coming days. But as we wrap up, it just occurred to me, as an African and someone vested in our market, I just started connecting the dots. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm part of a company called I'm Longo. If you please visit imlango.com. We are in education, and we are actually taking gadgets to the most impoverished areas, equipping schools, and making sure that the children there are able to learn on gadgets. And I just started to make the connection between what we're doing. We give each child a card, and it just occurred to me that that card is an identity. And so as we close, I'm asking myself, what role do each of us play? As we finalize, I want you to look at actions moving forward, and maybe what commitments can you, in the space that you are in, make towards helping drive Africa as a partner, as a collaborator, as a supporter, towards this vision of a single digital market. Thank you, Mats. You want to start?
I think it's a great thing, right? First, I think we should all wear this badge, which symbolizes the 17 Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. So that's number one. Number two.
Know the goals, wear the badge, live the goals.
That's number one, get awareness. From GSMA perspective, we are back in Kigali in July with something called Mobile 360, which is an event similar to this, maybe not as big. But again, shining the light on the importance of connectivity, importance of affordable connectivity, importance of data privacy, identity, as well as the spectrum that we need to have to survive. So I think that is a clear commitment from us. We will continue to drive these type of points, working closely with governments, working closely with regulators, as well as mobile operators and industry.
Thank you. Please, Maurice.
Yeah, so from a business perspective, we've been engaged, say, in Africa, but also in other countries, on providing blueprints on how you can implement, say, getting schools and children educated. How do you bring IT into education? So we work with many governments and companies where we basically an independent advisor. We've recently done the same on, say, the data center. So we've provided a blueprint on how to build out a data center in a country. And not only like hardware specifications, but also from an organizational perspective. What does it require? Who do you need? What skills? What type of people and functions? So you can start, be fully operational. And then coming back to education, I think education is critical. You look at Africa, I think 60% of the population is below 25. Yeah? If you look at the opportunities and the challenges for employment, yeah? Many of the new businesses who are extremely successful today globally are born in the cloud, driven by a solid ICT infrastructure. And if there is one message I want to give Africa, the opportunity is ours here. We have the people, smart people, education is building out, build out that infrastructure so the next generation can invent and can be the next Uber, the next Facebook, or the next Google.
Thank you. I feel inspired. Thank you so much for that. Robert, please.
So I think one of the things that we can do, which we're doing, which we all need to do more of, is partner, right? So we, for example, see the relationship with the network operators as a symbiotic relationship. There's an interdependence. For what we do, we need great networks. But for the operators, we can provide the content and the demand that actually can help them build their business and attract investment. So very concretely, for example, it turns out that especially in very rural areas, one of the things that prevents operators, mobile operators, from going from 2G to 3G or 4G, they need more spectrum, that's obvious, but it's the lack of backhaul, right? How do I connect that tower and that base station, right? To be able, the typical way of connecting that is a narrowband microwave that was fine when it was just GSM voice. I can do multiple calls. A single smartphone, by the way, those are typically what are called E1s, 2 megabits per second. A typical smartphone consumes 8 to 12 megabits per second each way, symmetric. So that network can't even support one. So, for example, in northwest rural Uganda, we've partnered with Airtel and a small operator, a small company called BCS. We've built a 780-kilometer fiber core network that's an open fiber. Any of the other operators may join, may use that. I mean, that's just one example, right? We have multiple examples with Telefonica in Latin America and other places. We need to be partnering more and partnering on investments and sharing those, because without that, we're not going to see the kind of infrastructure that's needed to get everybody connected with networks that have really super capacity and capability so that they can benefit from the applications.
Thank you for that. So that's SDG 17. We need to be partnering. Partnerships are critical.
SDG 9C, which is the infrastructure. Right?
Thank you. Let me come to you now, Vice Minister, please.
In order to improve the situation in ICT in Africa, including the education issue or human resources, it is very important to observe the real needs, what the African people would like to have as a real needs. And I think it is only obtainable by the self-directed by the African people. I think international society is very willing to help by sharing experiences, consulting and cooperating to design and construct the infrastructure or ICT solutions and to build capability in human resources. I think so.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. The final word, sir, is yours.
Thank you. Firstly, I think Africa does not have to repeat mistakes we made in the European Union. Instead, to have a huge single market with more than 500 million healthy customers. In fact, we have in Europe 28 relatively small markets. The same story here in Africa. And for startups in Europe, as well here in Africa, it's practically impossible to, or very difficult to scale up. In other continents, to scale up, they have to move to somewhere else, to China or to the United States. So I would like to quote once again our Honorable President Kagame, who said that Africa needs to come together. Then, secondly, about concrete commitments you asked for. In the European Union, we launched a Digital for Development strategy. Everybody knows that when talking about global development aid, then the European Union is the biggest donator. 52% of global development aid is coming from the European Union. We invested from EU budget during the last 5 years into development projects 32 billion years, and when we will take all EU member states also together, then even 82 billion years. But only 500 million years went to digital purposes. Right. It's not good, and we decided that there has to be in every development project also a digital component.
That's good news, and we also heard this from Dr. Musisa Kitui this morning. How much are we putting into digital? The world must put more. But Africa can do this. Maybe my final words will be this. Having heard from all the experts, there's much to be done. But do we know what to do? I'm asking many experts in this room, do we know what we must do? Oh my goodness, there's silence. But I believe wherever you're sitting, you know what you must do. And we know what the different stakeholders must do. The question is, will we rise slowly by chance and then flounder? Or will we rise strategically through hard work and by design? And we must be bold enough to put in the work, make the partnerships happen, to invest what needs to be invested. And you, the people in this room, are critical on that journey. I leave you with a challenge. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your sessions. Thank you.
First comes thought, then organization of that thought into ideas and plans, then transformation of those plans into reality. We are well aware that the fourth industrial revolution is well underway. At Smart Africa, we are working to ensure that Africa is not left behind. The Smart Africa Manifesto received the support of all African Union members at the General Assembly held in January 2014. Since then, several initiatives have shaped the path the continent is taking towards digital transformation. The One Africa Network is establishing affordable voice and data rates, boosting regional integration. The Smart Africa Scholarship Fund is providing opportunities to our students. Smart Africa also passionately champions the Smart Women and Girls Initiative, aimed at totally eliminating the gender digital divide on the continent and beyond. Championed by Burkina Faso, the Education for All through ICT initiative is connecting our schools and universities. Djibouti is driving the African Cloud infrastructure project focused on developing storage and data processing. The Made in Africa initiative, focused on the assembly of electronic devices, is increasing consumption and spurring tech innovation. This is part of Gabon's flagship Smart Africa project. The Africa Smart and Sustainable Cities initiative is working to respond to challenges faced by our cities, an effort led by one. The Internet for All initiative, part of Senegal's flagship project, is establishing platforms to connect new internet users. We could not have reached here without the incalculable contribution our partners bring to the table. Member states have now increased to 22, covering a population of over 550 million people across the African continent. Strategic partners have championed the Smart Africa Manifesto not only across the continent, but across the globe. Private sector partners have joined the Secretariat and continue to champion policy and programs that will benefit all. Together, we are putting ICT at the center of the socio-economic policy agenda to promote sustainable development. Improving access to connectivity, championing accountability, efficiency, and openness, putting private sector first. As champions of Africa's digital transformation, we invite you all to join us and propel our journey to achieve our mission. We look forward to your ideas, your knowledge, and your opinions in the summit as we tackle this year's theme, Accelerating Africa's Single Digital Market. Distinguished guests, welcome to the Smart Africa's annual gathering of Africa's brightest and smartest, the 4th Transform Africa Summit.